Avert high food costs. Food is an important human basic need. Simply without food or access to food, we die. And with limited access to healthy and varied food, we become unhealthy and sick, and we may die much sooner and or may live a low quality of life. So by this logic and by extension, again denying or curtailing the access to food for individuals is akin to denying the right to life. And by this logic, food and access to food should be free. With this as a baseline, any cost paid for food is too much. But it is egregiously abusive when you are forced to pay a high price for a basic right like food. Food is the fifth largest expense for U.S. families, averaging about $600 per month. My family, extremely cautiously, spends over $850 per month from a precarious working lower middle class income. And I can tell you this is a big chunk of our monthly income, close to 25%. For many, especially young families, about $600 is an entire week's gross income paycheck. And if you have a large family, it is not uncommon to spend $900 per month for food. That would be a distressing 35% of that $600 weekly take-home pay. Food cost is especially harmful right now, and those outside of the comforts of wealth or food assistance are groaning in pain. As mentioned, the recent inflation of 2021 to 2023 has caused food costs to skyrocket and in some instances double in price. Egg prices nearly doubled from already high costs in the early winter of 2023, and other food item increases ranged from 10 to 30% since 2021. Remember, food prices were high for most U.S. incomes to comfortably afford before 2021, and the inflationary increases have added salt to the wound. So the situation's criticality is hard to appreciate. Food insecurity is defined as their access to adequate food for active, healthy living is limited by lack of money and other resources. Some experience very low food security, a more severe range of food insecurity, where food intake of one or more members is reduced and normal eating patterns are disrupted. Food insecurity is currently at a sleep-depriving 10.2% in the U.S., having a similar percentage globally. It is reported that 45% of child deaths are due to hunger and related causes. So too many in the US and the world have not and are not having an easy time affording food, to put it mildly. This is despite the US's and the world's efforts to provide some aid to needy families. Access to food assistance in many states in the US is cumbersome, confusing, overly complicated, and at times hostile for applicants to navigate. Requirements could be draconian and difficult to qualify for, even for very needy families. For example, in the far behind the progress curve state of Alabama, in the U.S., you must have no more than $2,000 to even be able to legally apply for aid. And for a household of 3, you must make less than $32,318 per year in gross income. Of this pre-taxed income, the take-home pay may only be about $29,787 in income paychecks. This is only about $7,800 above the federal poverty guideline income for a family of 3. And of course, these required income amounts are taken before deducting all other costs of living. It was recently reported that a family of 4 on a tight food budget may be easily spending close to $1,000 on food during the recent inflation period of 2022 to 2023. It is needless to say that the price of food is volatile and seemingly permanently on the rise. And our greedy and mostly capitalist societies appear to be using the basic need of food to reap grotesque profits from their captive populations. You see, these corporations have grown to have gargantuan economic and political power, and naturally they routinely abuse this power. One way they have done this is by bidding to oppose the social programs that fund food aid. For example, the CEO of Goya, one of the largest canned foods companies in the Americas, announced his sanctimonious support for the very presidential administration that supported a deeply slashed food aid budget in 2019. And large fast food chains and food manufacturers routinely and quietly donate to U.S. presidential campaigns, who are historically hostile to social programs that help the poor. These include Wendy's, McDonald's, Dunkin' brands, among many others. For example, the 10 largest U.S. food and beverage companies followed suit with this anti-aid program agenda. So your governments are very much in cahoots with food companies, and they are clearly helping each other out at your expense. Legislation is routinely passed to loosen up all sorts of restrictions on the way food companies operate, while simultaneously being used to lower food aid budgets. Take the case of Georgia, when in the midst of the pandemic, its governor opted to deny much needed federal aid that would have helped its anemic aid for needy families. You are effectively forced to pay for high food prices, largely because most of us have been rendered impotent to produce any food. As discussed earlier, we lack the education and hands-on experience to produce any significant amount of food independently. It is simply a skill and subject utterly not discussed in schools, nor around kitchen tables. The norm is, and you are expected to, buy all your food and work to get the money to buy food. I strongly believe that this is a premeditated condition most of us are herded to fall under. But there are other choices. You don't need to buy all of your food. Food has been built into our ecosystems since before farming began thousands of years ago, and we all have the right to access and eat that available food, all free of charge. All this is according to our morality, humanity, religions, and international law. We cannot be prevented or otherwise forced from producing our own food. There is a vast body of knowledge in food production, but simply planting and maintaining seeds or food-producing plants in fertile ground is the start to it all. Of course, the soil type, sunlight time, and temperature available are some factors to consider when attempting to produce food from plants. And the type of food and the growing season are affected by your geographic location on the planet. If plant-based food growing is your goal, you should learn much about this subject through education and practice. You may also raise animals for meat, milk, and eggs. Methods and technologies available to grow farm animals for food while off the grid will be discussed in a later chapter. There are a variety of diets and food choices that affect the type of food production methods, resources, and costs necessary. But it is absolutely possible to save big when you produce your own food. You may even produce enough to completely avoid having to buy food. You may even produce a high enough quality of food to give it to others or sell it. Food production as an occupation brings virtually unlimited varieties of lifestyles. These depend on types of food, capabilities, and many other factors. For every household and individual willing to produce food, it is difficult to estimate costs of producing food. But we may begin to estimate the savings of not purchasing food at the supermarket. Per year, savings can add to over $12,000 in many cases. For example, you may be able to cheaply generate 10% of your food supply, potentially keeping about $1,000 per year in your bank account. Also, you may become an off-grid part-time farmer and produce, say, 80% of your food, and potentially keep $8,000 in your bank. So the savings can be substantial. But I believe the larger reward of self-sustainability in food production is the fact that you control your food supply, not your trusty local business person nor any government. You can closely control the food quality that you and your loved ones consume. You also know that you are not supporting a rotten and corrupt system of corporations that is willing to abuse the public to increase profits and power for itself.
Thank you for listening to this podcast or watching this video. Please subscribe, like, and share so you can support this work and so I can reach more people like you. If you'd like to support this content further, please click on the links provided here. Thank you again. Have a great day.